Welcome to Dusty Reels, a show where I watch classic films with no research or historical context. Basically, I go in as blind and as ignorant as possible. I know those of you who follow my normal reviews are probably saying, what else is new right about now? But there's so many classic films that I haven't seen, which from my point of view, it is pretty disgraceful for a film critic when you consider the amount of terrible throwaway movies I have seen. It kind of feels like I'm not doing my job, but at the same time, I want to go into these movies as underprepared and as clueless as possible, so in a way I won't be assessing them based on their reputation and prestige, and I go in as close as I can to the context I normally review other films, which is usually along the lines of it's either released that week or I just come across it randomly. I want to go into these movies with that same kind of right next film kind of feeling, you know what I mean? I should mention, after having watched these films, I do then proceed to do a bit of research and dig a little deeper. So today's film is Rebel Without a Cause. And can I just say, my research after this film, the first thing it flagged up was how tragic each of the three actors who played the three central characters in this movie, how tragically their lives ended, really. James Dean, of course, famously died in a car crash at 24. Natalie Wood, who got an Oscar nomination for her role in this movie, died in a drowning accident at 43. And Sal Mineo, who also got an Oscar nomination for this movie, was murdered in a stabbing at 37. So unfortunately, these guys didn't have much luck after this film at all, really. I can't think of any other film in which the three leads had such tragic ends in real life after the film. But anyway, back to the film. So when you're watching movies, or at least when I'm watching movies with the modern sensibilities that I have now, if you're watching something like Rebel Without a Cause, directed by Nicholas Ray in 1955, you have to realise you're not watching a movie that's meant for you. It's of a different time. The acting techniques are different. Even iconic moments of the film have been filtered through time to mean something different to you, and you know, so on. You've almost encountered particles of the movie that has formed the genetic makeup of other movies you came across first, if that makes sense. Like, there is a plot point in this movie where James Dean's character, Jim Stark, hates being called chicken. But for me, that's Marty McFly in Back to the Future. In fact, now that I think about it, isn't 1955 the year that they actually travel back in time to in Back to the Future? Actually, the point I'm trying to make is the chronological influence is slightly skewed for a 2018 film critic, because the things that the movie has influenced, like Back to the Future, in a more natural evolution almost for somebody like Robert Zemeckis, was presented to me in an unnatural order. You know, I got Back to the Future first. For him, it was more of a natural progression. Well, for one thing, he created the movie Back to the Future. Or for instance, even Tommy Wiseau's most iconic line from his cult film The Room, "You're tearing me apart," is actually from Rebel Without a Cause. And what's more fascinating is he actually nails his James Dean impression. It's just that acting styles have moved on so much from 1955 that when you place that acting style in a 2003 movie, it's out of place and seems ridiculous. So, for me at least, there is this uneasy tightrope walk of critical analysis of these older films that is a balance between what you have a problem with because it is of that time and you're not, and what you have a problem with in the context of analyzing a film in an overall sense. It's a question there is no definitive answer on, but this is what I wrestle with. So, Rebel Without a Cause, after the credit scene that shows James Dean drunk on the pavement, introduces us to our three juvenile delinquent characters in a police station. James Dean's Jim Stark is there because he's basically shit-faced drunk. Another kid, Plato, played by Sal Mineo, is there because he killed a litter of puppies. And Judy, played by Natalie Wood, is there for curfew violation. One of the things so far in my inexperienced journey through classic movies I like so much is that there never seems to be that streamlined approach to plot, pacing, story, and even camera we get with the often ultra slickness of modern movies. So there is a lot of time to breathe in this early police station scene. So much so that I actually was beginning to wonder if the whole movie was going to take place within the police station building. Again, a massive benefit of watching a movie with zero research. Now, I actually think this film feels almost like two different movies, and the one I watched for the first half I liked a lot more than the movie I saw which takes place in the second half. The first half of the movie captures the kind of nihilism associated with teenagers, but it's a nihilism that comes about from having not figured out your own moral code and structures as you try and figure out your own life. It's a kind of rejection of principles from the structure you're born into, structure from your parents, structure from education, and structure from the law, which eventually you kind of counteract that sense of wandering and that sense of nihilism with the formation of your own principles and structures and beliefs that kind of take over from the ones provided for you. What I always found fascinating about teen movies, well, good ones anyway, is that they're grappling with that while being immature, not yet an adult or having responsibility of adults who have a proper say on things, and not being emotionally coherent to know what they want to even say or how to process their thoughts. So there is great scenes in Rebel Without a Cause, like the one in the planetarium where the school teacher is explaining how the world will eventually end, juxtaposed with teenagers just being heckling teenagers and basically being dicks. And all the three central characters' behavior and actions is influenced heavily by the parental structures from which they come, which I thought was done very well. James Dean's character sees his father as this kind of emasculated figure, and as a result, and perhaps in a bid not to be like him, is constantly getting involved in what would be considered classic displays of knucklehead masculinity. Like, in one scene, his father is depicted in an apron. It's quite extraordinary and almost laughable how he has this suit that is covered by this really frilly apron. So James Dean is grappling with that kind of masculinity in this film, which I found interesting because he almost doesn't want to get involved in some of these classic displays of masculinity that he gets involved in this movie, but almost does it as a rejection of how he sees his dad and how he doesn't want to end up. Natalie Wood's affection is rejected by her father in this film, so she's kind of looking for affection in all the wrong places, especially within the circle in which she hangs out with and her boyfriend Buzz Gunderson. While Plato, despite being wealthy, doesn't really have his parents in his life, so kind of looks for a surrogate family from James Dean's character and Natalie Wood's character as well. Although, to me, I think the actor totally plays the Plato character as someone who is gay and almost dangerously obsessed with James Dean. So anyway, we have this nice internal reason behind the character's reactions established, which I really liked, and that was important for me, especially because many times through the dialogue in this film I couldn't actually work out what the hell James Dean was even on about, what exactly he was complaining about, what exactly he was trying to articulate, and just some of the things he said. But maybe that's the point. It's meant to be some kind of generational conflict between parent and kid, so it is meant to be lost in translation, or maybe it has the unintentional side effect of me as a 2018 observer of this movie being able to relate much more to the adults than teens. Or maybe that's just my age now in general, although it hasn't been a problem in modern day teen movies I've watched so far, so who knows. So the first half of this movie has scenes that are iconic, and not iconic in the way in which I mentioned before, in which almost particles of this movie have transcended this movie into other movies in the future, although they probably have. But when I say iconic, I mean my own personal movie iconic moments. I loved the scenes between Buzz and James Dean outside the planetarium and Buzz's gang, the whole build up, the dialogue, how it all takes place. I thought it was great, like a kind of proto-teen action movie. And I really like the scene that takes place later on at a seaside cliff. I love how that was shot. I love how it unfolds. I love how it went down. Now, from there and that point on, I really didn't like where the film went. I guess it's mostly storyline issues, but I would have actually preferred the first half of the film to be the whole film. I thought it had a great structure. I thought there was enough there, and it is the high point of the movie for sure. And I didn't enjoy Rebel Without a Cause from that point on nearly as much, because I'll be honest, I mentioned early on that this movie was a reference point for The Room. Well, again, I have to be honest, the character of Plato is basically Denny from The Room as well. I didn't think the actor who played Plato was very good, which shows what I know because he won an Academy Award for it. The character bugged the hell out of me, and I really didn't enjoy the character getting so much focus. I thought he was the weakest part of the movie and just this whiny creep who I didn't find very interesting at all. And when the plot starts to gravitate towards him, I felt it took away from the elements of the movie in which I liked a lot more, and the characters I was much more interested in, which were James Dean's character, his father played by Jim Backus, and Natalie Wood's Judy. In fact, I really like the rivalry and the interplay between James Dean and Corey Allen's Buzz as well in this movie, which is a lesser focus in the second half of the film. And while I guess Plato is meant to be creepy and complex and maybe unlikable and all those things I did feel about him, I guess for my 2018 sensibilities, he just seems like a very basic CSI creep of the week version of it. I'm sure he probably wasn't in 1955 and probably was much more impactful, but for my own personal 2018 reappraisal of Rebel Without a Cause, he was basically Denny from The Room, unfortunately. So for me, Rebel Without a Cause is a movie that's certainly worth a look at. It did give me a lot of pleasure. It does have a few iconic scenes, earlier in the film especially. But I think how you ultimately feel about the movie and where it goes will come down to how much interest you have in the character Plato. Because if, like me, you feel he actually gets in the way of what's good about the movie, the second half of Rebel Without a Cause will drag a lot.